My beloved child. Wait, before your thoughts rush ahead, let this moment settle around you like a quiet evening breeze. Something gentle is moving toward your heart right now, and it carries the feeling of a message that was never truly lost. It simply took its time finding you. Last night, while the world grew quieter and countless lights faded behind closed curtains, a feeling awakened somewhere far from where you are sitting now. It did not arrive with noise. It did not demand attention. Instead, it appeared softly, almost unnoticed, like the first star appearing in a darkening sky. And the strange thing is this. The person connected to your heart may not have fully understood what was happening in that moment. They were not planning a grand realization. They were not searching for answers. Yet somehow, your presence entered their thoughts. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But deeply. There are moments in life when someone suddenly remembers a laugh they have not heard in a long time. A smile appears for no reason. A familiar feeling returns without invitation. Last night carried that kind of energy. Something important is waiting for you. Stay with this feeling. Because what unfolded next was far more meaningful than it first appeared. Imagine a quiet room. Imagine a person sitting alone after a long day. The distractions have faded. The conversations have ended. The responsibilities that filled every hour are finally resting. And then, your memory arrives. Not because they forced it. Not because they tried. But because some connections refused to disappear, even during silence. They remembered something small. Maybe it was the way you once expressed kindness when nobody expected it. Maybe it was the way you understood things that others overlooked. Maybe it was simply the feeling of comfort that followed every thought of you. The details hardly matter. What matters is that the memory stayed. And as the minutes passed, it grew stronger. Have you ever noticed how certain people leave an impression that time cannot erase? Not because they are perfect. Not because they are constantly present. But because they make another person feel understood. That is what began unfolding last night. A realization. Slow. Quiet. Unexpected. The kind that doesn't arrive all at once. The kind that arrives piece by piece until suddenly it becomes impossible to ignore. Don't skip. Because the most beautiful part is only beginning to reveal itself. For a long time, this person may have been moving through life distracted by responsibilities, expectations, and endless noise. Yet last night, for reasons they could not completely explain, all of that faded into the background. And what remained was a feeling. A simple feeling. The awareness that your presence matters more than they have allowed themselves to admit. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a movie-like moment. But in the quiet, honest way that changes people from the inside. Sometimes hearts speak most clearly when nobody else is around. Sometimes the deepest truths arrive when there is nobody left to impress. And last night, something inside them became unusually honest. They began replaying moments. Small moments. Moments that once seemed ordinary. Yet now those same moments carried a different meaning. The way you cared. The way you listened. The way your energy remained with them long after conversations ended. What once felt ordinary suddenly felt rare. And that realization created a silence they could not ignore. A beautiful silence. The kind that makes a person pause and ask themselves a question they have avoided for far too long. What if this connection means more than I thought? What if this person has touched my life in ways I never fully recognized? And what if the feeling I keep returning to isn't random at all? Pause there for a moment. Because these questions matter. Not because they guarantee anything, but because they reveal something real. They reveal attention. And attention is often where every meaningful story begins. As the night grew deeper, another realization appeared. One that surprised them even more. They noticed that thoughts of you did not create pressure. They created peace. Think about that. In a world filled with endless noise, endless opinions, endless expectations, your memory became a quiet place. A place where they could breathe. A place where they could simply be themselves. And when someone begins associating peace with another person's presence, something inside their heart starts changing. Slowly. Naturally. Without force. Without effort. Without announcement. That change may not be visible yet. But it is real. And last night became part of that process. The message itself was not spoken aloud. No dramatic speech. No perfect confession. No grand declaration. The message was something softer. Something far more meaningful. It sounded like this. I hope they're doing well. Simple. Yet sincere. I hope they know how much their presence matters. Quiet. Yet powerful. I hope life is being kind to them. Gentle. Yet deeply heartfelt. And sometimes, my beloved child, the most beautiful messages are not the loud ones. They are the quiet wishes we carry for someone else's happiness. Because those wishes reveal what truly lives inside the heart. But there is still one piece missing. One final realization that arrived just before the night ended. And strangely enough, it may be the most important part of all. As they prepared to move forward into another day, one thought remained behind. One thought refused to leave. One thought stayed with them longer than everything else. The thought was not about the past. It was not about what was lost. It was not about what could have been. It was about possibility. The possibility that some connections continue growing even during silence. The possibility that certain people enter our lives for reasons we only understand later. And the possibility that the story is not finished yet. Not even close. Because what happened after that realization, and the feeling it awakened this morning, is something we must uncover next. There is something fascinating about a thought that refuses to disappear. Most thoughts come and go without leaving a trace. They arrive for a moment, then drift away like clouds crossing an open sky. Yet every now and then, a single thought lingers. It remains long after everything else has faded. That is where this story continues. As morning arrived and sunlight slowly replaced the quiet darkness of the night, something unusual happened. The feeling that had appeared before sleep did not vanish. It stayed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Simply present. Like a gentle melody that continues playing somewhere in the background. And that surprised them. Because they expected life to resume as normal. They expected responsibilities, routines, and distractions to take over once again. They expected the memory of you to blend into countless other thoughts. But it didn't. Instead, your presence seemed clearer than before. Have you ever noticed how certain realizations become stronger after we stop resisting them? For a long time, this person may have explained away their feelings. They may have convinced themselves that what they felt was temporary. They may have told themselves that there was nothing worth examining too closely. Yet something changed. And once a heart begins telling itself the truth, it becomes very difficult to return to old explanations. That is exactly what began unfolding. The morning felt ordinary. But their thoughts did not. A familiar memory surfaced again. Then another. And another. Small moments they had almost forgotten suddenly seemed important. Not because the moments themselves were extraordinary, but because of how they felt when remembering them. The emotions attached to those memories had remained alive. And now they were impossible to ignore. Stay with this feeling. Because something important is waiting for you. The most meaningful connections rarely reveal their value all at once. Instead, they unfold gradually, like a sunrise revealing details hidden in the darkness. At first you notice only a little. Then a little more. Then suddenly the entire landscape looks different. That is what was happening inside them. A perspective was changing. Without effort. Without pressure. Without anyone forcing it. And perhaps the most surprising part was this. The more they thought about you, the more they began appreciating things they had previously overlooked. Your patience. Your sincerity. Your ability to bring comfort without even trying. The quiet strength you carry. The way your presence leaves people feeling lighter rather than heavier. These were not dramatic discoveries. Yet they felt significant. Because sometimes the qualities that matter most are the ones we notice last. The heart has a strange habit. It often recognizes value long before the mind catches up. And when the mind finally understands what the heart already knows, everything begins shifting. That shift was happening now. Slowly. Beautifully. Almost invisibly. As the hours passed, another realization arrived. This one felt different. Deeper. More personal. It came in the form of a simple question. What is it about them that keeps returning to my thoughts? The question lingered. Because the answer wasn't obvious. It wasn't about appearance. It wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about circumstance. It was something harder to describe. A feeling. A sense of familiarity. A sense of connection. The feeling that somewhere in this busy world exists a person who understands things without needing long explanations. And that realization touched something inside them. For a moment, everything became quiet again. Not the silence of loneliness. The silence of understanding. The silence that follows an important truth. Don't skip ahead in your thoughts. Because this next part matters. There are moments when people suddenly recognize how much space someone occupies within their heart. Not because that space recently appeared, but because they finally notice it. The space had been there all along. Hidden beneath distractions. Hidden beneath hesitation. Hidden beneath daily life. Last night opened the door. Today allowed them to step through it. And on the other side was an awareness they could no longer ignore. You matter to them. Perhaps more than they have admitted. Perhaps more than they fully understand. And while they may not yet have every answer, something inside them has stopped pretending that the connection means nothing. That chapter is over. Now comes the chapter of understanding. Now comes the chapter of honesty. Now comes the chapter where feelings begin revealing themselves one layer at a time. Imagine standing beside a lake so still that it reflects the entire sky. At first glance, everything appears calm. Yet beneath the surface, gentle currents are always moving. That is exactly what is happening within them. The surface may appear unchanged. Life may appear normal. Nothing dramatic may be visible from the outside. Yet beneath that calm exterior, important emotions are moving. Growing. Expanding. Finding their shape. And those emotions are leading toward a realization they never expected. A realization connected directly to you. Because the more they reflected on their feelings, the more they noticed something remarkable. Thoughts of you inspired hope. Not pressure. Not confusion. Hope. The kind of hope that makes the future feel brighter. The kind that encourages people to believe that meaningful things are still possible. The kind that quietly whispers, maybe this connection exists for a reason. That whisper grew stronger throughout the day. Not overwhelming. Not demanding. Simply persistent. And every time it returned, it carried the same warmth. The same comfort. The same quiet certainty that your presence had become important in ways they could no longer dismiss. Yet there is one final piece that has not fully revealed itself. One realization still waiting beneath the surface. One message still trying to find its way into the light. Because later, when everything became quiet once more, when the day finally began winding down, when distractions lost their hold and honesty returned, a single thought appeared. A thought so personal that it caught them completely off guard. And the moment they allowed themselves to feel it, everything changed. What that thought was, and why it may become the most meaningful part of this entire journey, is only beginning to unfold. The most powerful moments are rarely the loudest ones. They do not arrive with perfect timing. They do not announce themselves. They do not demand attention from the world around them. Instead, they appear quietly, almost unnoticed, until suddenly you realize they have changed everything. That is where this journey continues. As evening slowly approached and the day began releasing its hold, the feeling that had followed them since the night before remained exactly where it had started, close to their heart. Not fading. Not weakening. Growing. And that growth carried them toward a realization they had not expected to face. For a while, they tried focusing on other things. Responsibilities. Plans. Conversations. The countless details that fill an ordinary day. Yet every road somehow seemed to lead back to the same place. Back to you. Back to the comfort of your memory. Back to the feeling that something about this connection deserved more attention than they had been giving it. And that was when the unexpected happened. A simple moment became unforgettable. Perhaps it was during a quiet walk. Perhaps while sitting alone. Perhaps during one of those ordinary moments that usually pass without meaning. But suddenly they imagined something. Not a grand fantasy. Not an impossible dream. Just a simple image. An image of sharing a moment with you. A conversation. A smile. A laugh. A peaceful silence. And what surprised them most was how natural it felt. Not forced. Not imagined for entertainment. Natural. As if their heart had already made room for that possibility long ago. Stay with this part. Because something important is waiting for you. The truth is, people often discover their deepest feelings through the smallest experiences. Not through dramatic events. But through quiet realizations. Through noticing who comes to mind when something beautiful happens. Through noticing whose happiness matters to them. Through noticing whose presence feels like home. That was the realization beginning to unfold. And once it appeared, it became impossible to ignore. The thought returned again and again. Each time carrying a little more clarity. Each time revealing another piece of the truth. Until eventually they found themselves asking a question they had never fully asked before. Why does thinking about them make me feel this way? The answer did not arrive immediately. But it was already there. Waiting. Patiently. Like a sunrise hidden behind the horizon. Because the answer had never been about a single memory. It had never been about one conversation. It had never been about one moment. It was about how all those moments came together. How every interaction created something larger than itself. How every memory added another thread to a connection that had quietly grown stronger over time. And as they reflected on that truth, a warmth settled over them. A genuine warmth. The kind that cannot be manufactured. The kind that appears only when a person stops running from what they feel. Don't skip ahead. Because this next realization carries extraordinary meaning. For a long time, they may have focused on what they were uncertain about. Questions. Timing. Circumstances. Possibilities. Yet now their attention was moving somewhere different. Toward what they knew. And what they knew was surprisingly simple. Your presence made their world feel brighter. Not perfect. Not magical. Simply brighter. You brought something valuable into their life. Something genuine. Something difficult to replace. And once that truth became clear, another thought quietly followed. What if they don't realize how much they mean to me? The question lingered. Long after everything else disappeared. Because suddenly it mattered. Suddenly your understanding mattered. Suddenly your happiness mattered. Suddenly your smile mattered. Not as an abstract idea. But as something deeply personal. And that realization touched their heart in ways they had not anticipated. There are moments when affection transforms into appreciation. And moments when appreciation transforms into something even deeper. That transformation was beginning. Slowly. Naturally. Without pressure. Without force. Like a flower opening toward sunlight. The feeling was not dramatic. Yet it felt profound. Because the most meaningful emotions often arrive with gentleness rather than intensity. And the more they embraced that feeling, the more they recognized something beautiful. You had become part of their hopes. Part of the way they imagined better days. Part of the future they quietly wished for. Not because they planned it. Not because they expected it. But because their heart kept placing you there. Again and again. As if it knew something their mind was only beginning to understand. The evening continued. Hours passed. The sky darkened. And with every passing moment, the message forming inside them became clearer. It was not a message of uncertainty. It was not a message of confusion. It was a message of gratitude. Gratitude that someone like you existed. Gratitude that your path crossed theirs. Gratitude that even during ordinary days, thoughts of you could bring unexpected peace. And perhaps that is the part that would melt your heart the most. Because genuine affection often begins there. With gratitude. With appreciation. With the realization that another person's existence has made life feel richer in ways words struggle to explain. Yet the story did not end there. Because just when they thought they understood their feelings, just when they believed they had reached the heart of the message, another realization appeared. One even deeper. One even more personal. A realization that arrived late into the night when everything around them became still. And the moment they finally accepted it. The message they had been carrying inside for so long began transforming into something they could no longer keep hidden from themselves. What they understood in that quiet moment. And why it may change the direction of everything that follows. Is waiting just beyond this chapter. Some realizations arrive like a whisper. Others arrive like a door quietly opening inside the heart. You do not hear the hinges move. You do not see the exact moment it happens. Yet suddenly, what once felt hidden becomes visible. That is exactly where this story continues. The night had returned once again. The world was slowing down. Lights dimmed behind windows. Conversations faded into silence. The endless movement of the day gradually surrendered to stillness. And in that stillness, something remarkable happened. The feelings they had been carrying for so long finally stopped asking for permission to exist. For the first time, they simply allowed themselves to feel. No explanations. No distractions. No attempts to push the emotions aside. Just honesty. Pure honesty. And honesty has a beautiful way of revealing what matters most. As they sat with their thoughts, memory after memory drifted through their mind. Not because they were searching. Not because they were forcing anything. But because certain memories naturally rise to the surface when they belong there. A smile. A conversation. A small act of kindness. A moment that seemed ordinary at the time. Yet now every memory carried new meaning. It was as if pieces of a puzzle were finally finding their place. And the picture becoming visible was impossible to ignore. Stay with this moment. Because something important is waiting for you. The realization was not dramatic. In fact, it was surprisingly simple. They missed you. Not only when you were absent. Not only during lonely moments. They missed the feeling your presence created. The comfort. The warmth. The sense of ease. The quiet happiness that seemed to appear whenever thoughts of you entered their mind. And that realization stopped them in their tracks. Because missing someone is different from merely remembering them. Remembering happens naturally. Missing someone reveals value. It reveals attachment. It reveals care. And once they recognized that truth, another thought immediately followed. A thought they had not expected. A thought that stayed with them for the rest of the evening. What if they have no idea how much they mean to me? The question lingered. Because suddenly it mattered more than ever. For so long, they had been focused on understanding their own feelings. Now their attention shifted toward you. Toward your heart. Toward your experience. Toward your journey. And something softened inside them. There is a beautiful moment that happens when affection becomes selfless. A moment when a person's happiness begins to matter as much as your own. That moment was beginning to unfold. Quietly. Naturally. Without announcement. They found themselves hoping good things would happen for you. Hoping your burdens would become lighter. Hoping your days would bring unexpected reasons to smile. Hoping that life would meet you with kindness. And every one of those hopes came from the same place. A place of genuine care. Don't skip ahead. Because this next realization may be the most meaningful one yet. As the night grew deeper, they began noticing something unusual. Whenever they imagined future possibilities, your presence appeared naturally within those thoughts. Not because they forced it. Not because they planned it. Because it felt right. Certain people become part of the way we imagine tomorrow. Not through effort. But through significance. And your significance had become impossible to deny. The future felt brighter when you were part of it. The future felt warmer when thoughts of you were included. The future felt more meaningful when your presence existed somewhere within the picture. That realization settled deeply into their heart. And for a while, they simply sat with it. No resistance. No hesitation. Just acceptance. Acceptance of what had been growing all along. Acceptance of the connection they could no longer explain away. Acceptance of the truth that your impact on their life was real. And then, something happened that surprised even them. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, they felt peaceful. Completely peaceful. Because sometimes clarity brings relief. Sometimes the heart becomes calm the moment it stops fighting what it already knows. That calmness wrapped around them like a warm evening breeze. And within that calmness, a message began forming. Not a message filled with grand promises. Not a message filled with dramatic words. A simple message. A sincere message. A message carrying more meaning than anything else they could have said. If they could have spoken directly to you in that moment, perhaps it would have sounded something like this. I hope you know that your kindness stays with people longer than you realize. I hope you understand that your presence creates comfort in ways words cannot fully describe. I hope life reminds you how valuable you truly are. And most importantly, I hope one day you see yourself through the eyes of those who care about you. Because if you could, you might finally understand why thoughts of you have remained so unforgettable. The message lingered. The feeling remained. And the connection seemed stronger than ever. Yet the story is still unfolding. Because before the night finally ended, one final realization appeared. One realization so personal, so heartfelt, and so unexpectedly beautiful that it left them completely still. A realization that transformed gratitude into something deeper. A realization that revealed what their heart had been trying to tell them from the very beginning. And when that truth finally stepped into the light, the message from last night became far more meaningful than anyone could have imagined. That truth is waiting just ahead. Closer now than ever before. Sometimes the heart spends a long time speaking in fragments. A feeling here. A memory there. A moment of clarity followed by uncertainty. Small pieces scattered across days, weeks, and even months. Then one evening arrives when all those pieces suddenly begin fitting together. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But enough to reveal a truth that has been waiting patiently beneath the surface. That evening had finally arrived. The quiet realization that appeared before the night ended did not feel dramatic. In fact, it felt surprisingly gentle. Yet its impact was impossible to ignore. Because after reflecting on every memory, every feeling, every unexpected moment of warmth, they discovered something they could no longer deny. You had become part of their heart's safest place. Pause there for a moment. Let those words settle. Not because they are grand, but because they are rare. The world teaches people to protect themselves, to stay guarded, to keep certain feelings hidden. Yet every now and then, someone arrives whose presence makes those walls feel unnecessary. Someone whose energy feels calm instead of complicated. Someone whose existence feels comforting rather than demanding. That is what they finally understood. When life felt overwhelming, thoughts of you brought peace. When the future felt uncertain, thoughts of you brought hope. When everything seemed noisy, thoughts of you brought stillness. And once they recognized that pattern, they could no longer pretend it meant nothing. Stay till the end. Because the most heartfelt part of this message is only now beginning to reveal itself. As the night deepened, they stopped asking themselves whether their feelings were real. That question had already been answered. Instead, a different question appeared. A question that carried far more meaning. What would I want them to know if I could speak honestly from my heart? The answer arrived almost immediately. Not because it had just been created. Because it had been waiting. Waiting for courage. Waiting for honesty. Waiting for the right moment. And the answer sounded something like this. I hope you know that you have brought more light into my life than you realize. Simple. Yet powerful. I hope you understand that your kindness has never gone unnoticed. Quiet. Yet sincere. I hope you remember that your presence matters. Gentle. Yet deeply meaningful. Those thoughts remained with them for a long time. And the longer they stayed, the clearer everything became. Because true affection is not only about receiving. It is about appreciating. It is about recognizing value. It is about feeling grateful that someone exists exactly as they are. And gratitude was overflowing inside their heart. There was no need for perfect words. No need for elaborate explanations. The feeling itself was enough. The feeling said everything. Don't skip this next part. Because it may be the most beautiful realization of all. As they sat in silence, they suddenly imagined something unexpected. Not a specific event. Not a detailed future. Just a feeling. A feeling of sharing happiness with you. A feeling of celebrating small victories together. A feeling of laughing without needing a reason. A feeling of peace. And what surprised them was how natural that image felt. As if their heart had already accepted something their mind was still learning. The possibility that certain connections are meant to be cherished. Not rushed. Not forced. Cherished. Protected. Appreciated. Allowed to grow naturally. That realization filled them with warmth. A quiet warmth. The kind that remains long after the moment itself has passed. And in that warmth, one final message began forming. A message so simple that it could easily be overlooked. Yet sometimes the simplest messages are the ones we remember forever. If they could place one thought directly into your heart, it would be this. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Not someone else. Not a different version of yourself. You. With your strengths. With your imperfections. With your unique way of seeing the world. Because those qualities are the very things that made you unforgettable. The very things that made your presence meaningful. The very things that continued echoing through their thoughts long after the night had ended. And perhaps that is why last night's message feels so special. It was never really about a dramatic confession. It was never about grand promises. It was about recognition. Recognition of your value. Recognition of your impact. Recognition of the quiet beauty you bring into the lives you touch. The night may have ended. The stars may have disappeared into morning. The hours may have moved forward. Yet the feeling remained. And even now, somewhere within their heart, that feeling continues growing. Slowly. Steadily. Like the first light of dawn stretching across the horizon. Because some messages are not meant to be spoken once and forgotten. Some messages become part of a journey. A journey that continues revealing new meaning with every passing day. And this message, the one that began in the silence of last night, may only be the beginning of what their heart is still learning to say.